let's talk about my Calathea Orbifolia. This is my gorgeous Calathea Orbifolia plant that you will have seen on YouTube or on Instagram, a few other places. And a while ago, I asked you to send me some questions because I always get a lot of questions when I display this plant. And so today I'll be answering some of those questions. Let's get into it. There were a lot of questions and I've tried to categorize them in a way that kind of makes sense to me, and so we don't have to keep going over the same questions again and again. So today I'll be discussing general care for my plant, pest and disease management, watering and fertilizing, potting and repotting, propagation, and a few other miscellaneous items. So first things first, I am calling this a Calathea Orbifolia. And I know some people say Calathea, Calathea, tomato, however you want to say it, we are talking about this plant. And I know this plant has been reclassified and is not called a Calathea anymore, but is called a Geopersia. But for today's purposes, we are going to call it a Calathea because a lot of people know it as a Calathea, and because this is not a botany class, I am okay to keep using the name Calathea. Now, this plant over here, I have had for 3 years. This plant is 3 years old. It arrived in my house on the 26th of February, 2021. This is a picture I took when the plant first arrived, and it was really small, as you can see. And yeah, I know, it's hard to believe, but it is the same plant. It's the exact same plant. When I bought this plant, I actually bought two. You can see from the picture there's two plants. One was for me and one was for a friend of mine. Now, I did give my friend her plant at that time, and she reports that her plant does not look like this. Her plant is not doing too well, and she's thinking she might want to give it back to me. And I'm thinking, yeah, give it back and we'll see. I'll put them side by side and see if I can get that plant to thrive the way this one does. So who knows? I don't know. So short answer is this plant is 3 years old. Where did you get her? I got her from a website called Uprooted here in Australia, in Melbourne. And I think at the time, Uprooted was still in New South Wales, maybe? I forget where they were before. I think it was either Victoria or New South Wales they were before they moved up to far north Queensland, because it's so much nicer there for the plants, I think. But yeah, I got her from Uprooted. And I love to show the lovely people at Uprooted their plant every chance I get. I love them to see what she has become, and I am ever so grateful for my plant. Thank you. How do you care for her, please? If you can't pick her up, how do you manage her a reservoir or water, please? That is, yeah, how do I care for her? So this plant lives in a 30 centimeter pot, and she lives in a cache pot, a white one. That 30 centimeter pot lives inside that cache pot. Now, I am not going to pick it up today, honestly, because it is a very heavy. Yeah, I can't pick it up anymore. And they got the information that I can't pick it up anymore from this video that I did showing you the plant, and I show you where it lives and how it is very difficult for me to pick up because it's really awkward because the leaves are really everywhere. So it's hard for me to get my body close to the pot to pick it up safely, but also it is quite heavy. So because I'm not picking it up safely and it is heavy, those two things mean that I might actually cause myself an injury, so I tend to not pick it up. Hi, I just want to give you guys a brief update on my massive Calathea Orbifolia. Here she is in all her majestic glory. She is now living in a 30 centimeter pot, and I actually cannot pick this plant up anymore. It's really heavy. It's a health and safety issue for me to pick up, but there she is. That is how wide she is. I can't actually get her in the frame. Let me see if I can move back a bit. That is her over there. So the question then is, how do I care for it? It just lives in one spot. It lives there and it stays there. It lives right in front of a window. It doesn't live in a grow tent. It lives in front of my window. It doesn't have a grow light shining on it. It just takes what the sun gives it, some morning sun, and that is pretty much it, because I can't do anything else. And this is exactly where she lives in my home. She's sitting right in front of a very bright window, as you can see over there. I had to close it just so I could make this video. I might think about giving it a grow light actually, now that we're in the winter season and it is getting a little bit darker and there isn't as much light there. I might think about doing that. I don't know. But I guess the other thing that comes into play when you talk about how do I care for it is for a plant that's living in Leca clay balls. that needs to be flushed, that becomes problematic. So ideally, when you're growing your plants in Leca clay balls, you want to take your plant to a sink or take it outside and have some running water go through that plant, put that water over that plant and make sure it is nice and clean. This is what ideally you should be doing every month or something, although I do know a lot of people actually don't flush their plants at all. So now, for this particular plant, it now falls in the category of I have not flushed it since I repotted it a year ago. Yeah, that's it. I said it. Yeah. Again, only because it's just really, really difficult for me to do that. Ideally, I could actually get someone to help me pick it up, and I could take it outside, take it out of the cache pot and flush it that way. I could. That is something I could do. But look, in all honesty, I don't. I just don't. All I do is I top up that reservoir. I just put fresh nutrient solution into the reservoir when I see that the reservoir is running dry, and that's it. Ideal, not ideal, I don't know, but that's what this plant gets. I guess one thing that you could do is actually get a pot that has a little spigot, so you can actually open up the little tap, and when you're flushing, you open up that little tap and that water runs out. That's one thing you could do. I know my friend Alison, the long-winded Leca lady, actually has a post on Instagram talking about how I think it's one of her monsteras that she's got living in a bucket that's got a spigot. So she has no intention of picking up and doing all sorts of things with this plant for flushing, but she just uses the spigot to do that. So that might be something you might want to do if you're thinking about putting a very, very large plant like this one and having it grow long-term in Leca clay balls. Next question, is humidity a deal breaker for her to thrive? My house runs around 35 to 45% depending on the season. So before I answer this question, I'll talk a little bit about how I grew this plant from the small plant that it used to be to the plant that it is today. So when I got this plant in 2021, in February, I immediately transitioned it from soil to Leca, and it was a direct transition. I didn't use the long method. I just immediately took it out of the soil and put it in Leca clay balls. At that time, I had a grow tent set up, and a lot of my precious plants were actually living in my grow tent. And in my grow tent, there was a grow light. I had a humidifier in there and it was nice and warm. So this Calathea actually started off life in Leca clay balls in a very ideal way. So the humidity was never less than 70%. And of course that grow light was on for about 12 to 14 hours a day. So that's the conditions in which this plant started. It really helps that plant develop and just establish itself in Leca clay balls and just really start to grow. Now, that's not to say that you can't grow a Calathea outside of a grow tent. You definitely can. This here is my Calathea macleana. This is another Calathea that I've got living in Leca clay balls. You can see those are the clay balls there. That is the reservoir. This plant does not live in a grow tent. It does not have added humidity. It does not have a grow light. It's simply living in a good spot in my home. It's very close to a window. It's got a lot of light. The humidity in my home is about, I think, 45-50% generally. But I probably want to say that where this plant sits is a little bit higher because there are lots of plants living in that one spot. So I tend to have groups of plants in various ideal places, and so they create a little microclimate, and the humidity around those plants, I would hazard, is a little bit higher than, say, in our living room where there are no plants at all. So it is possible for you to grow your plant outside of a grow tent, but with humidity levels going as low as 30%, I don't know, that might be a bit low, depending on how your plant is responding, because these things are also entirely plant dependent. It's all very well and good to give a figure, but if your plant is responding very well and humidity is 35 and it's, I see no reason to do anything different. But if you see that your plant is struggling, lots of crispy leaves, very unhappy plant, you might want to think about raising your humidity around your plant simply by grouping your plants together like I have mentioned before, or you could actually enlist the use of a humidifier. But of course, bearing in mind when you're using a humidifier to be really, really careful. keeping your eye out for mold in case that starts to develop because maybe your humidity is too high and you don't have a lot of ventilation in your space. So yeah, going back to my plant. So this plant then lived in my grow tent for probably maybe 8 months, maybe less. I honestly can't remember at this point because I would have taken the Calathea out of the grow tent to put other plants. Once the plant, got happy and was living okay, I took it out of the grow tent, put it to live outside, and it has not skipped a beat. My place doesn't get lots of light, and I do substitute with grow lights. Would that be okay on her throughout the day? I don't see why not. I mean, if you have grow lights on, usually people will have grow lights on from between 12 to 14, even 16 hours a day. Because remember, you do need to allow that plant that dark period for it to go through the other processes that it needs to go through when it's dark. So it's not ideal to put your lights on 24/7, but the plants do need to actually have some downtime. But yeah, if your home is really, really dim, I would put my grow lights on if I were you. I have my grow lights on right now for some of my plants because we're in winter in Melbourne at the moment. It is quite dark in the house right now. So for the plants that are really nowhere near close to a window, or even if they are close to a window, it's still relatively dark, I use the grow light. But it's easy to determine how much light your plant needs if you are using the help of a light meter, because it's difficult for human eyes to perceive whether the light that your plant is receiving is adequate or not. We'll just, give it a look and think, yeah, it's fine, but it actually might not be fine for your plant. So using a light meter is really going to help you determine exactly how much light your plant is getting, and then you would know whether you actually need to supplement that lighting or not, depending on the kind of growth that you're looking for your plant. So if you want your plant to absolutely explode and be the best it can possibly be, you want to provide the maximum amount of light that this plant needs. But, if you're happy for your plant to just coast along, it might be fine with just the light that's coming from a window without you putting your grow lights on. So it entirely depends on the outcome that you're looking for. All right, let's go to pests and disease management. Has your Calathea Orbifolia ever gotten pests? If yes, how did you treat it and how long did it last? I want to touch wood and say no, my Calathea Orbifolia has not had pests yet. And I really, really hope it stays that way, because if this plant got pests, it would be a pain to sort out, because it probably needs to wipe down leaves, depending on the kind of infestation that it's got. Make sure that I spray the foliar spray in everywhere, because the one thing that Calathea Orbifolia this size does have is their leaves everywhere. Their leaves inside, their leaves that was down. It's like a jungle down there where the leaves are coming from. So it's really hard to see what's going on. This plant has actually flowered many times without me even realizing that the plant is flowering. And the only time I know that the plant is flowered is when I'm pulling off all the dead flowers when I decide to clean up my plant in the jungle down there. So it would be difficult, and I probably would be using a systemic insecticide as well, depending, of course, on what the pest that I'm dealing with is. So short answer to that question is no, my plant hasn't had pests yet. And so I am not able to answer the follow-up questions of how long and what did I do. And I'm just really hoping it stays that way. I guess one of the reasons that my plant hasn't had pests yet is because it lives all by itself in a spot all by itself. So even if my other plants do get pests, I guess that distance gives it that protection. It helps it just nothing ever gets there, which is great. And I really hope it stays that way. So I hope I'm not jinxing anything. My Orbifolia has developed brown spots since I'm using the Leca method. I think this signals overwatering. I made sure the roots are not directly touching the water. Is this inevitable, and will the plant ultimately adapt? It's very, very hard to say without actually seeing the plant, knowing what kind of setup you've got. Is it a submerged setup or a wick setup? How often do you change the water in your reservoir? What's the lighting situation for your plant as well? These are all things that would determine whether a plant is not doing as well at the beginning when you just transition it from soil to leca. But of course, you do need to allow your plant a transition period, especially with plants like Calatheas with massive leaves. It's very obvious when any little change has happened. you will immediately see the leaves start doing funny things. So as long as you are doing the right thing with your reservoir, you are changing over that nutrient solution, the temperature is right. Make sure that the plant is getting as much light as you can give it, because one of the things that people don't realize is that Calatheas actually do like quite a fair bit of light. I was just reading up on how Calatheas are grown in nurseries, and I think the recommendation for light in the nursery was about 1,000 to 2,000 foot candles. So that's quite a fair bit of light. So you might want to find out exactly how much light your Calathea is getting, because all that will actually have an impact on what your plant looks like. But once you're past that initial hiccups with the transition, that initial transition stage of moving your plant from soil to leca, the roots are now used to living in that hydro environment, everything seems to be going okay. All you probably need to do is just chop off those leaves that have got those unsightly, edges. The new leaves start to come on, start to pop up, and that plant eventually is going to start looking good. And no, I did have these instances with my plant when I first transitioned it from soil to leca. Even months afterwards, you would get the occasional yellowing leaves or whatever. Because another thing is, yellow leaves actually it's a normal thing for plants as well. So in as much as it can be an indication of something going wrong, sometimes you can't really just pinpoint on what's happening. Just if it really, you don't like the look of it, just cut it off and away you go. But I did have instances where that happened, and all I did was just cut those leaves off. As long as my new leaves were coming out, I knew my plant was going to be okay. So as long as you know that you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right processes in terms of how you're transitioning your plant, it probably will be okay once it settles in. Next question. Mine is growing these little black dots on the undersides. I sprayed some sulfur mix on it the other day and I haven't noticed any new dots. But what the heck is it? Is it bacteria? Is it fungus? Is it normal? I only noticed it doing this once the leaves sized up. I'm repotting in a plastic slotted drainage vessel this week. Hopefully this fixes it. She's currently in a glass container with no drainage. Look, again, it's really difficult for me to respond to questions like that, because I have no idea what little black dots means, what they look like. It's just really helpful to at least have a picture. So questions like this, it's really difficult for me to respond to. What I'm finding really helpful now is people who've joined my Semi-Hydroponics with a Leca Queen Facebook page. You're then able to actually upload a picture, show us exactly what your plant is doing, show me exactly what your plant is doing. Then I can have a much more educated opinion about what's happening, because I can actually see. Otherwise, then I'm just shooting in the dark and I have no idea what's going on. I like that you've told me that it's currently in a glass container with no drainage. And I know a lot of people do use this glass container, no drainage system, and it works very well for them, and it's absolutely fine. I have no problems with people using that. People use all sorts of different methods for all sorts of various things. There's so many ways to skin a cat, I always say. But my practice, I don't use the glass jar method. I don't particularly like it myself, because I just don't think that those roots are getting enough ventilation, enough aeration. And I think I don't know, I've never tried it, but I find that it's easier for me to flush the plant when it's living in a pot that's got holes in it, and then you can just flush and all the water comes out, and I'm not having to tilt things or make holes in glass vases, or I don't know, all the things I hear people do when they're growing their plants in glass jars. So I don't know, maybe that has something to do with the glass jar. I have no idea. Again, like I said, it's difficult for me to answer a question like that because I don't have specific details. So if you do have some pictures of your plant, it would be great if you could show them to me via the Semi-Hydroponics with the Leca Queen, a Facebook page. And then when you do that, it's not just me looking at your questions, it's other people, and some of who actually grow their plants in glass jars, and they obviously have more experience with that. They might be able to speak to your issues, so let me know. But yes, Calatheas actually do get fungal infections as well, and you would be treating those fungal infections as you would a fungal infection on any plant. So you use the recommended products for killing off those fungi that you have available to you, and in theory, things should be okay. How do you avoid brown tips? And do you mist it? So the first thing is I don't mist my plant. I don't mist my plant at all. Largely because I don't know, and this is completely anecdotal. I haven't done an experiment. I just don't think misting plants raises the ambient humidity around the plant enough for me to bother going around misting my plants. So that's one reason why I don't mist my plants. Aside from the fact that depending on how you're misting, how much you're misting, the air around your plant, you might actually end up doing more harm than good, because you might end up actually having way too much water sitting on the leaves of your plants. Next thing you know, your leaves have got bacterial infection because it's all seeding in those little droplets of water. So I don't know. So no, I do not mist my plant. How do I avoid brown tips? Oh, I've done a video about Calatheas and that, so click on the link above and you will see that. But I think avoidance of brown tips, first of all, is for some plants, even with Calathea, sometimes it might be difficult to avoid, and you might just have to sort of live with them, possibly, unless you're doing absolutely everything 100% that your plant wants you to do. But my take on it is, if you're providing the conditions that your plant needs, then that won't be an issue. So overwatering and underwatering are major causes of issues around what's happening with the edges of your leaves. So if you're overwatering, if you're underwatering, you might see those dark edges, yellow edges, darkening off into crispy edges. For me, I have found growing my plants in Leca clay balls or using semi-hydroponics to be the solution to this problem, because it completely gets rid of the guesswork of watering. So I don't have to wait until I think that my plant needs watering, risking underwatering, or I'm not too heavy-handed with the watering and watering too regularly, risking overwatering. So because my plant is sitting in that reservoir, it's got constant access to water. It takes in what it needs when it needs to. My plant knows how to do that. And so my plant invariably looks like this, because it literally takes care of itself. And of course, if you really hate the brown or the yellow edges, you can go down the route of cutting the edges off. But that doesn't really solve anything, because as soon as you cut off that bit, then the next part actually gets dark and yellow, and you just keep going on. And how much of a leaf are you going to cut, really? But with my plant, this plant is living in Leca clay balls, and you can see those are the leaf original edges. I do not cut those leaves, so this plant is exactly the way it is. But even having said that, you can see that, I don't know if you can see, this one here does have a little bit of an edge there. Because you know what? Nature's not perfect. Even that is okay. I see another one over here. I'll try and show you more on that. They're there. It's not like they're not there. But they're minuscule. When you look at the bulk of the plant, I actually don't see them. I actually have to get down to the almost microscopic level, like really look at my leaf to actually see that they're there. So my take on it is, growing my plants in semi-hydroponics definitely helps, because that'll regulate that watering schedule and your plant will be happy. Crispy leaves, leaf browning issue are the most common problems in Calatheas. How do you manage this? Again, it is going back to giving your plant what it needs, depending also on the type of water that you've got. So you've mentioned that people talk about using filtered water or non-chlorinated water. So people have got different qualities of water all around the world. So some water is really heavy, has got lots of mineral deposits in it, and your plant might not be happy. So it's worth checking the quality of the water that's coming out of your tap in your home. So if the quality of that water is not very good, it's very high in chlorine or chloramine, lots of calcium, not good for your plant. So you might want to think about using filtered water, reverse osmosis, or rainwater. That's where that kind of thing comes in. But for me, I'm really lucky because the water in Melbourne is really good. So I use tap water to make the nutrient solution for my Calathea, and it is just fine. So I don't think it's a matter of saying Calatheas don't like tap water. I think it just depends on the quality of water that you've got in your region, because we all have different qualities of water. So if you can check that, make sure that that's okay, then great. If not, then you know that you probably need to give your plant a different kind of water, or get a plant that's not as sensitive. All right, watering and fertilizing. Does your Calathea Orbifolia use growth technology foliage focus too? Yes, my Calathea Orbifolia uses growth technology foliage focus. All my plants use growth technology foliage focus. I make up a solution and I give it to everyone. So yeah, this plant grew up on growth technology foliage focus, nothing else. And when I say nothing else, I mean no other primary nutrient. I do have other additives that I put to the growth technology foliage focus. For example, I'll put some root zone, I might put some silica, I might put some beneficial microbes, but by and large, the primary nutrient is always growth technology foliage focus, because that's what I have available to me and that's what works for my plants. But other people don't have access to growth technology foliage focus. It is not the only nutrient that you can use for your plants in semi-hydroponics, certainly not the only nutrients you can use for your Calathea Orbifolia. There's so many others out there. General Hydroponics, Flora Series, Super Thrive, Dynagrow, or Foliage Pro, don't know what they call it. Yeah, so many. So don't be stuck up on wanting to find foliage focus if it's not readily available to you. Just find a nutrient solution that's suitable for plants growing in semi-hydroponics. Do you use distilled water? Yeah, I've already answered this question. I don't use distilled water for my plant. I use good old tap water, and that's only because the water in Melbourne is fantastic. It is a-okay. My plants love it, but you need to check whether the water that's coming out of your tap is suitable for your plants. Check the chlorine levels, check the chloramine levels, check the calcium levels, all that good stuff. And if it is not suitable, then you might want to start thinking of substitutes like distilled water, reverse osmosis water, rainwater, and so on. How often do you fully dump and refresh your reservoir? This plant, the last time I did that was a year ago. I'm telling you this right now. That's the truth. A year ago, when I repotted it, was the last time it got a complete batch of fresh nutrient solution, unless in between those times it actually went dry before I topped up. But otherwise, it's too hard. It's too hard for me to take the plant out of the pot and do that. So I'm really thinking about other ways in which I can pot up my plants to be able to do the flushing. If not, then I just need to find someone to help me take it outside and flush it that way when it's not so hot so that my leaves get burnt. But yeah. Short answer is, not often enough. Do you top off with fresh water between reservoir refreshes, or do you top off with nutrient solution? Never fresh water, never fresh water. When I've got my plant sitting in my reservoir, I will fill that up with nutrient solution. And then because the pot that I've got my plant in at the moment actually doesn't have a water level indicator, so I never know like visually whether my reservoir is running dry. All I have to do is actually literally put my hand down the pot and feel whether there's actually nutrient solution in there. When I can't feel the nutrient solution, I then top up with fresh nutrient solution, never just water, because it would then be difficult for me to match the concentrations that I know this plant needs in order for it to grow optimally. And that's the key. That's the key about growing my plants in semi-hydroponics. And that's how you can see that my plant looks like this. This plant is living in Leca clay balls, and I have optimized its growth because it's receiving the amount of light that it needs, and it's receiving the nutrients that it needs because of the nutrient solution that I'm always providing in the reservoir over there. And of course, it does receive the water that it needs. And it's not too cold in here. We like to keep it nice and toasty in the house. So, temperature is also, we try to keep it, about 20 degrees in the winter. We're from, warmer climes, and we don't like it to get too cold in the house. So it gets it gets a good temperature. It's living a good life. So yeah, no, I would not advocate for refreshing with water. I always refresh with good nutrient solution. Do you measure the EC or the ppm and target a range to keep the plant in? No, I don't. And you can do that. And I know a lot of people who do that. They measure the electrical conductivity of the nutrient solution that they're making. And that's just making sure that the plant is getting the right concentrations of nutrient solution for it to thrive. I don't do that. And the main reason I don't do that is I just think that's a superfluous step that I don't need to do. I'm happy to mix my 5 mils of foliage focus in my 1 liter of water, which is what is recommended for semi-hydroponics growing. I'm happy with that. This is what it's gotten me so far. I think it's working. I see no need to fix what is working. But I know a lot of people who do like to measure their nutrient solution based on the electrical conductivity. That's telling them what the right concentration. And that is also okay. It really is just a function of how you want to grow your plants, what it is you want to do in your practice. And there's lots of charts out there that tell you what electrical conductivity to use for specific plants. But for me and my practice, my goal when I'm growing my plants is to keep things as simple for myself and as I can possibly can. And because I don't do electrical conductivity for my plants, measuring all that stuff, I don't talk about it a lot because I just don't have a lot of experience in doing that because I don't do it. I can do it, but I see no point in doing it because it's not something I do on the daily. So if it's not something I'm doing on the daily, why am I telling you to do it on the daily? Is a kind of thing, that's the kind of the way I look at it. So I don't, and I don't check my EC, and these are the results that I've got. So yeah, works for me. If you are interested in the electrical conductivity of the nutrient solution that I use for this plant when I mix up my foliage focus, I've done a video where I show you what those concentrations are, the electrical conductivity, the total dissolved solids in parts per million. You can watch this video and you'll see what they are if that's something that you'd like to find out. Do you ever check the reservoir pH between refreshes? If so, what direction does your pH usually trend? And do you pH correct between reservoir refreshes? Or do you only do your pH at the time of mixing and no other pH adjustments beyond that? I love this question. People ask me this question all the time. It comes up again and again and again. The answer is no. That's the first thing. No, I don't check the pH of my reservoir between reservoir refreshes. Okay, that is the first thing. So what this person means, if you're not sure what this question means, is once I've poured my solution into my reservoir, right? So for example, I've got my Calathea macleana here. I've got my solution that is living in the reservoir in there. So I've pH checked my solution when I've mixed it up. It's within the right range, 5.5 to 6.5 or whatever you want to do. It's there, and I'll put it in there, and it's great. I know my plant is getting exactly what it needs, right? So I'll mosey on to my plant 2 days later or a week later, and I have my little pH reader, and I'll check the pH of the nutrient solution in that reservoir. That's what this question is about. Do I do that? Do I check the pH in the reservoir before I add new solution? And no, I don't do that. And I'll tell you why I don't do that. One, I think it's just a lot of work. It is just too much. Again, going back to the simplicity. This is supposed to be a simple thing for me. This is a hobby that's supposed to make me feel good. I'm supposed to just do it quickly and just go and do other things in my life that are important. I'm not meant to be walking around with my pH meter testing all my 600 plants or however many they are. I think that's a step too far for me personally. I know some people do it. More power to them. But for me personally, that's a step I refuse to take. Another reason I don't check it is, in my mind, the pH is going to change. It is not going to be that 5.5 or that 6.5 it was when I put that nutrient solution in the reservoir the first time around. Why is that pH going to change? Because one, there is evaporation taking place. that water is in, that nutrient solution is in an open thing, it's evaporating. So as that is evaporating, you get concentration of the nutrient solution. So all that is mucking around with the pH. The plant is absorbing nutrients. That's going to change the pH. There's the leca that's in that pot that was there. There's just so many things that are going to change the pH of that nutrient. It's just going to be absolutely impossible for it to not change, right? And then the next thing is, if I've come along, I've checked the pH and my pH is 4 and I'm, oh my God, that is, no. I need to fix that because my pH needs to be between 5.5 and 6.5. I will then get my pH up, right? My pH up solution. And what do I get? Like how I can't get my head around how you actually get enough pH down solution in a little syringe to put in there, mix it, and make sure that it's the right pH. I've never done that. I don't know how people do that. I would love to know. If you do that, please let me know in the comments below or hit me up on my semi-hydroponics Facebook group because I would love to know how people do that. I don't do that because I think it would be too hard. And I think that's where it's important to actually be refreshing your nutrient solution every 2 weeks, because then once you take out that old one, throw it out, clean your cache pot nicely, put fresh solution. You're giving your plant a fresh start. The pH is just right. The concentrations are just right, exactly where they need to be. But yeah, I don't know how people adjust the pH of the nutrient solution in the reservoir. I would love to know. Let me know if you do. The other thing that I think, and this is completely anecdotal, again, I have these philosophical things that go through my mind that I think are applicable to my plants. I think plants are very resilient, is what I think. I think a plant is able to withstand those pH changes in that situation. You know, the plant, I mean, for example, this plant over here, it's been living in that reservoir for some time. It's been going through this cycle of pH changes every so often because the nutrient solution goes down. I think the plant knows what to do maybe when the pH changes to a point where it's not happy, or maybe it's absorbed enough of that nutrient solution so that when the pH is hostile, it doesn't need to even bother. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up off the top of my head. But these are the things I think about when I think about how being so precious and checking the pH of the nutrient solution in my reservoir for each individual plant is definitely a step too far. And does my plant actually really need me to do that? I don't know, but I don't think so. Next question. How often do you flush the substrate? Again, I don't. I really don't. This Calathea Orbifolia was last flushed a year ago. In June 2023 was the last time I flushed it. I haven't done that again. How often do I recommend that you flush your plant? At least once a month. That is what I recommend because it's good practice. It refreshes your plant. You've got a chance to actually clean out your reservoir, put clean, fresh nutrient solution, wash off all the dead and sloughed off roots. You know, it's a good thing to do. Is your plant going to die if you don't do it religiously every month? I don't think so. My plant hasn't been flushed in a year. I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm just saying, you know, I think it's not the end of the world if you don't flush your plant as regularly as you should. That's all I'm saying. Just do what I say, don't do what I do. All right, next question. How often do you repot her? Is she living in direct sun? So no, she is not living in direct sun. She is living in front of a window, and there is a sheer curtain in front of that window. And normally in the summertime, that sheer curtain does a really good job of protecting the delicate leaves from the harsh rays of the sun. But also where she lives, there's an overhang of the roof because there's a balcony there. So the rays of the sun are never really directly on the plant. So which is I guess a good thing. How often do I repot her? So yeah, I actually had to check this because I couldn't remember. The last time I repotted this plant was June 2023. So I haven't repotted this plant for exactly 1 year. And I can tell you that looking at this plant right now, I think she needs a repot. I am very, very scared. Looking at some of her leaves, they are looking a bit suspicious. I'm seeing a few yellow edges, a few crispy bits around those yellow edges, and not as many leaves. And I know it's not the growing season, right? It's winter in Australia, really. So I shouldn't expect that many leaves, but I know my plant. I know it, and I know when there's something wrong. And I think it might need a repot. I am not going to pick it up and look at the root system because I can't do that. And I am going to need someone to help me repot this plant because I don't think any of my family members want to do it because they don't want to be on camera. So this is a call out to any of you who live in Melbourne and want to help me repot my plant. Let me know in the comments below and we can set something up and you can be my special helper on that day because I need to repot this plant. But aside from finding someone to help me repot this plant, the bigger problem that I've got is what am I going to repot her into? Because at the moment she's living in a 30 centimeter pot. I need something bigger, a lot bigger, because I don't want to be repotting this plant anytime soon. And I'm thinking the only thing that can work right now for this plant is getting her a 40 centimeter lechuza pot. That's the only pot type that I know that is that big, but also has the little self-watering indicator, which will make it easier for me to know whether I need to actually fill up that reservoir or not. So the first thing I need to do is find some money to buy me that really expensive lechuza pot and also find someone to help me repot her. But you know what? I am going to buy that pot because my baby, I think she's worth it. When did you actually upsize her into a 20 centimeter pot? Did you wait until it was completely root bound or was there another trigger for you? Mine is starting to size up and giving me new leaves continuously. Thanks to our beautiful Sydney weather. Oh, lucky you. It's so much nicer in Sydney. It is so much warmer. It is so cold in Melbourne right now. You have no idea. So I'm not sure if I should upsize before winter hits or wait until spring hits this year. Well, I'm going to digress and just talk about the fact that when I'm looking at repotting my plants, I never look at the season. I don't care whether it's winter, whether it's autumn, whether it's blah. If I think a plant needs a repot, I will give it a repot. The plant's not sitting there thinking, well, okay, hang on, guys. Yes, she will do it. She is going to repot us. Just have to wait for a few more weeks until winter's up. If a plant needs something, do it now. I don't see why I need to wait. Because the other thing as well, I think people need to understand is when we talk about seasons and plants growing, yes, plants do slow down a bit. But usually, when I think what people mainly talk about, especially plants that are living outside, for our plants that are living inside where we are optimizing conditions for them, right? If it's winter, you've got a grow light on, you've got a heater on, you've got all these things on. Well, your plant might still be growing actually. So, it might not be like springtime growing, but it's still growing. So I think if a plant needs a repot, whenever it needs a repot, do it. When did I move it from a 14 to a 20 centimeter pot? It probably was in response to the plant looking a little bit root bound because with a 20 centimeter pot, it's easier to tell because you can actually just see the roots and you can feel the pot just getting a bit more compacted when you've got a plant living in Leca clay balls. But for my Calathea Orbifolia, it's also very easy to tell that it's becoming root bound because the leaves start to take on this yellowing tinge around the edges and you start to see those black spots developing. So I almost always repot my Calathea Orbifolia in response to what the leaves are doing and the patterns that it's showing me, not necessarily what the roots are looking like, because invariably I probably can't even see the roots anyway, especially for this particular plant at this particular moment. I just purchased a new Calathea Orbifolia and I looked under her luscious leaves to find a dying flower. Yay. What do? Nothing. The flower's going to die. It's going to crisp off. You just pick up the dead bit and just throw it away. Nothing to do. Does it have seeds? Look, I personally have never seen the seeds of a Calathea Orbifolia. The interweb told me that it may have seeds, but rarely. I don't know. And I'll be honest, I did not go deep into digging for information about Calathea Orbifolia seeds. I might do that and leave a comment below, but I thought I might just do this video now because it's been long overdue. But yeah, if it does have seeds, if you do get seeds, I think it would get seeds under the right conditions. Can you plant them in the pot? Yeah, you can. But whether you can get them from that little flower, I don't know. I don't know. How many stems does yours have? Sure. I would not have the foggiest. No idea. Absolutely no idea. Because a Calathea Orbifolia will start to get many, many, many. Because you can see, all you do is you just start getting more leaves and things start happening. As you can see from this Mafiana over here, you've got all sorts of things going on there. And if I took this plant out of this pot, I could probably split it up and actually have 2 plants more. So with this one, I don't know. And I couldn't even tell you. Like I said, it's a jungle in there. It's hard to know what's going on. Next question. Did you use the long method to transfer her to Leca? No, I didn't use the long method. I took her straight out of the soil and put her straight into the Leca, and that worked fine. Normally for my Calatheas, I do just do the direct method and they seem to be happy. I know some people do use the long method, but I don't bother. I just put them straight in and they're fine with that. How the heck do you transition the long way with this one? I've killed 2 now by putting them from soil to water to eventually move to Leca. I have over 50 plants, most of them in Leca, but this one, I don't know. I think I'd like to know exactly how you do your long method and what what conditions the plant is subjected to at that point. Because it's fairly straightforward to actually just get the potting mix off the plant, put it in a nutrient solution, put it in a bright, warm spot. And, once the plant is seeming to be happy, you can move it to Leca. So one of the things about Calatheas, though, is depending on the Calathea, you might not get those wide, fuzzy roots that you get with some, monsteras or some philodendrons that, we like to see when you're doing the long method. You might not do that. Sometimes their roots tend to be brown and stringy, not looking, the most fantastic. But the plant is still fine. So let the condition of the leaves guide you in terms of what's happening. But like I said, it's really also about the other conditions that you're providing. Is there sufficient light for your plant to thrive? Is the temperature okay? How's the humidity going? Do you maybe need to put a humidity dome around your plant to support those roots as you're going through the long method? Do you possibly maybe need to use a heat mat just to make sure those roots are nice and toasty and provide the best conditions for your plant to thrive? These are the things I'd be thinking about when I'm thinking about whether the long method worked for my plant and why it didn't. So let me know in the comments below and then we can go from there. Or even better, if you've got pictures of your plants, you know what to do by now. Hop over to the semi-hydroponics with the Leca Queen Facebook page, put those up, and it'll be a much more helpful conversation for you there. All right, let's go to some miscellaneous questions. When I see people hold Calathea like this, it makes me question why more people don't walk down the aisle at a wedding holding one as opposed to bringing boring old bouquet of flowers. If I ever get married again, I am so doing it. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Can you imagine a plant person's wedding? So instead of having flowers, as the arches and everything, you've got all these gorgeous plants, these gorgeous leaves, along the aisles, a flower arch around. Maybe you've got some apophos arch, and then the bride just walks down with a gorgeous bouquet of Calathea Orbifolia leaves. So yeah, no, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think that's a great idea. Why the heck do Calatheas have to be so unsatisfied with life? I swear, no matter what, mine only will thrive in humidity boxes. I know what your problem is. You have a case of Calathea illusion, like many of us do. We just think that we are going to crack it. We are going to crack the Calathea and it is going to be beautiful like this. Oh my, I will again refer you back to my Calathea illusion video, a video where I talk about how Calatheas are a little bit like alocasias, some Calatheas just won't work for you, or all Calatheas won't work for you. And in this video, I talk about how I've got this Calathea Orbifolia that is just absolutely thriving. It's understood the assignment. I've understood the assignment. I know what I need to do. But bring in some other Calatheas of nothing. I struggle as much as the next person. So I feel you. I feel your pain. And that pain is real and the struggle is real. I want to know why it has those beautiful stripes. Why does it have beautiful stripes? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I did actually look up this a lot. I looked it up and I just couldn't find an answer because maybe it's just one of those things that we'll never know. So some people were talking about camouflage. It acts as camouflage on the forest floor. So maybe the pests don't go to it. They go to the next plant. To be honest with you, I don't know. All I know is I am digging these stripes. These stripes are like, honestly, I think the Calathea Orbifolia is one of the best looking plants on the planet because of those stripes. So bring on the stripes any day. I absolutely adore them. Is this also called a watermelon plant? Yeah, I am told in some circles they do call it a watermelon plant, and this is something I learned for the first time. I did not know that. So thank you for letting me know that it's sometimes called a watermelon plant in some parts of the world. Who knew? What was the size of the plant when you switched to Leca? Mine is pretty big and I'm wondering what size of pot to use. Thanks. Yeah, my plant was pretty small when I transitioned it to Leca. I think it was still living in a 10 centimeter pot, as you can see over here. Or if it wasn't living in a 10 centimeter pot, it was in a 14 centimeter pot with a lot of soil. But it was a very small plant. Not the smallest you can find, but it was pretty small when I moved it. So yeah, that's what it looked like when I moved it from soil to Leca. About the size of pot for your plant? Again, that's a difficult one to say without seeing the actual plant. One thing that I will say, when you're trying to find a pot to use for your plant that you're transitioning from soil to Leca, or when you're repotting a plant that is living in Leca clay walls, the rules around pot sizes for plants living in soil are not the same as when you're growing your plants in Leca or in semi-hydroponics. When you're growing your plants in soil or in potting mix, you're told to not go up any bigger than a pot size or 2 sizes up. And the reason they tell you to not do this is because you'll then have a very, very big volume or a big mass of potting mix or soil. And when you water your plant, there's going to be a lot of soil that's going to be wet for a long time. And then you'll come back again next week and water your plant, lots more water. Water it again the next few weeks, lots of water. And because there's a lot of water and that plant is never getting a little bit on the drier side, the chances of your plant getting root rot are very, very high. So that's why they say that you shouldn't go up too many pot sizes because of that. Now, when you're growing your plant in Leca or in semi-hydroponics, that problem completely goes away because, the issue of overwatering is no longer a problem because our plants are used to living in a hydro environment and they're getting their water from the reservoir. So you're either using the wick setup or you're using a submerged setup. But either way, overwatering is a thing of the past. And what that means is that you can actually upsize and go really, really big with a pot for your plant, especially with really bigger plants like this one, for example. I know this plant right now is in a 30 centimeter pot. I am not going to put it in a 33 centimeter pot or a 35 centimeter pot. I want something really, really big, a lot bigger, because I know it's growing really fast and I don't want to be coming back to repot it anytime soon because it's a pain. So because I don't have to, I'm not stuck with the constraints of using a smaller size pot, I can go big and I can go really, really big. So that really helps me save time. And yeah, so that really helps. So yeah, think about that as you're thinking about what size to use for your pot. It might not be as problematic as you think. Mine is kind of splaying out a bit too much. Can you use a stake and tie the base of the stems to it? Will it damage the plant and prevent growth at all? Look, the Calathea Orbifolia does take up a lot of space. I mean, as you can see with my plant, I actually can't get the whole plant in this frame because it's really spanning over 1 meter wide because of, the way it's spread out at the moment. Would I put a stake? And I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. only because of the nature in which Calathea leaves come out. You know, they come out from inside each other right at the bottom. I don't know if I can, hang on. Let me see if I can find a, yeah, so you can see, if you look at this plant here, this, whoop! Oh my sword. I knew this would happen. Yes. Oh. Oh. Okay, so that was my Calathea almost toppling over because, I'll do that. That was going to be such a shame. I'm literally holding on to the plant because I've got it up on a stool, which obviously it became too heavy because it really is quite heavy. But anyway, that was great. I was able to save it. That's great. And I'm almost done with this video. So I'm just going to stay in this position now. So as I was saying, the leaves sort of come out from the bottom and then they fan out. So if you've tied things at the bottom, I think that might actually not be great for your plant in the long run. I think it might actually inhibit growth, and then it might actually disturb the leaves of the plant that you've got coming. Oh, it might actually disturb the new leaves coming out, and either they'll get damaged or something like that. So I definitely would not be doing that. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Maybe someone has done it before. Let me know in the comments below. But that's my take on putting a stake on it. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't know. I have mine by my bathtub faucet. It has many dark patches. Do you think the steam from the bath is burning it? It's in Leca. I give it a mild fertilizer in the reservoir. Could it be fertilizer burn? Again, a difficult question to answer without specifics. I would love to know what the humidity in that bathroom is like. I would love to know what kind of a setup your plant is. Is it in a submerged setup or is it in a wick setup? I would also love to know what fertilizer you're actually giving your plant, because you're thinking maybe it could be fertilizer burn. I would love to know that. What kind of fertilizer are you giving your plant? How are you mixing it? What concentrations are you giving it? How regularly are you changing that reservoir? I'd also like to know what else is going on in your bathroom. So when you say it's in your bathroom, right? And it's got dark patches, maybe, you know, is it some soap or some shaving cream or something that's fallen onto the leaves and caused a burn? Maybe, I don't know. It's really, really hard to tell with a question like this one. So if I were you, I would just be examining all those things to see what's going on and whether you can eliminate things and finally come up with a solution to what the problem might be. But, you know, I might also just take it out of the bathroom and see whether things improve with the new leaves as well. So I don't know. Let me know. This is a very interesting question. I'd love to hear a bit more. If you don't mind sending me a picture, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. So there you go, folks. That is my Calathea Orbifolia. I hope that was helpful for you. And yeah, if there are any more questions, just let me know in the comments below. And if you've got any very, very specific questions, please feel free to join the Semi-Hydroponics Facebook group with the Leca Queen. It is free to join, and there you can put your question to the group and I'm more likely to see it. And if you've got your pictures on there, it's so much easier to respond to those questions. If you have a Calathea Orbifolia and would like a little bit more information on how you can get your plant to look like this one, watch this next video where I show you how. I'll see you there.